Do you see India be part of the nuclear club such as the NSG?
India is a central player to most of the things in this world, including nuclear energy. India has a tradition of safe use of nuclear technology.
Iran, what is IAEA's assessment on how soon can, or reading on how soon can Iran actually go nuclear?
So if we take that metric, then they are very close.
But in terms of consensus, was China a problem for India at the NSG?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think there were a number of dialogues that were affecting the possibility of a package.
This is an India Today exclusive. I'm being joined by the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, that's IAEA, Rafael Grossi. Thank you so much for joining us here on the network.
My pleasure.
You have done a lot when it comes to the nuclear part of how the world is looking at nuclear technology, nuclear energy, and of course, how countries manage their nuclear aspects in nuclear energy. You've been part of the NSG and now for a very long time a part of IAEA. We'll talk about your future roles as well, but beginning with the India aspect of nuclear energy. How do you see India as a country that has been responsible, has been a part of the nuclear power group, and do you see India be part of the nuclear club such as the NSG?
India is a central player to most of the things in this world, including nuclear energy. India has a tradition of safe use of nuclear technology in many fields, including energy production. The nuclear program in the country is growing with new builds, with developments in the area of small modular reactors, so new technologies. So obviously India, for its own needs, the needs of its economy, but also potentially in the global market, has a very important role to play. So this is why I've always considered in my past, as you rightly mentioned, I was also associated with the Nuclear Suppliers Group. India is a very big player in nuclear. So I always believed that India belonged to any group, should be in any group that is associated with the governance of nuclear energy. The program here is growing. I will be visiting one of the nuclear power plants in the country, so I'm really looking forward to that.
All right, so let's just talk about nuclear safety then, and we'll come back to the India question, but there are so many conflicts happening today in the world. Nuclear safety, nuclear threats, all of them put together. How is IAEA dealing with it? The current crisis being Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It's in the middle of an ongoing conflict, now under Russian control. What are the threats when it comes to nuclear, when in a live war-like situation or a war situation? And how is IAEA looking at the safety and security of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant?
Well, in your question, there are two dimensions. Yes. You refer to nuclear safety or nuclear security in general, and then this specific case, which I will address. In general, the IAEA is the global hub for everything nuclear, including standard setting for safety operation of nuclear power plants. Obviously, each country has its own nuclear regulator, has its own rules, practices, and standards. But given the global nature of the industry and the transboundary effects of any nuclear activity, the role of the IAEA is indispensable because we set the minimum common denominators that all countries should observe. So your neighbors have nuclear energy, so you are reassured that they are following certain practices and you do the same. So this is in general, and this is something which is indispensable for the industry to thrive and to be successful. Now, the issue of the war put us in front of a completely unexpected situation, which was that as a result of the conflict, a nuclear power plant was occupied by Russian forces, and it's still the case. When that happened, actually the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was also, for some time in the beginning of the war, was in Russia, under Russian control. But that changed, and the Russian forces withdrew. So that happened. But when it comes to Zaporizhia, we immediately realized that this was a very unique situation. Why is that? Not only because the two countries were, and still are, unfortunately, at war, but because of the fact that the plant lies on the front line.
Yes.
Practically and effectively. I've been
Yes,
there
absolutely.
several times, as you know, and you have to really cross the front line where Russian and Ukrainian soldiers see eye to eye. It's quite a dramatic place in the world. So we immediately realized that the risks of a hit at the plant were very realistic, and that the occurrence of a nuclear accident with radiological consequences, meaning releases of radioactivity, would add an even more dramatic and tragic dimension to the war, and also, importantly, to nuclear energy in general in the world, in terms of the impact. So we decided to move in, which was, of course, not easy, because you are aspiring to go into a facility that belongs to country A, but which is occupied by country B, with mutually contradicting narratives. Yes. Of course, the Russians saying this belongs to us, and the Ukrainians saying this is our plant. So what do you do in that circumstance? Well, it took us many months of negotiations and consultations, and we finally were able to go there and establish a permanent presence by the IAEA. Today,
the IAEA has permanent presence right now as we speak?
As we speak. And this since September 2022. We have been there. When I visited the plant for the first time, I went with my first team, with experts in nuclear safety, security, safeguards, and basically we left them there, and they have been rotating all along. So this has had an enormous importance. First of all, because we have been able to witness the reality and to tell to the world, in this, you're a communicator. You know how negative and how destabilizing fake news can be, especially in a war. Somebody said, and I think rightly so, that in a war the first victim is the truth. So with a situation where countries are accusing themselves of creating irresponsible situations or taking us to a catastrophic environmental accident, well, then from the moment the IAEA was there, that stopped immediately. Right. Because the international inspectors were there.
So since September 2022, you're saying it's a safe zone?
No, it's not safe. It's not safe. There is a war.
No,
there is an international presence. We are interacting with both sides. Whenever something happens, we report immediately. We have discrete diplomatic channels to address issues with one or the other side. We have regular meetings. You have perhaps...
No, there have been no leaks, nothing that would be detrimental to the people and the population living around Zaporizhia.
No, not in terms of radiological releases. There have been circumstances, there have been attacks, there have been drones. As I was saying, this is a war. But the presence of the IAEA inspectors there has been a watershed, in the sense and unprecedented in terms of armed conflict, because we are an international organization acting in territory which is disputed,
On the front line.
And on the front line.
Okay. There is also a lot of conversation that has to do with nuclear material.
Yeah.
We are looking at President Trump now trying to cut deals with Ukraine to ensure their security. And all that critical material also has to do with a lot of nuclear material. In such a scenario, what's IAEA's reading when countries go into other countries looking for nuclear material, critical minerals, only to guarantee security? Is that how is the agency looking at this?
This is a very important topic that takes us to the evolution of the market and the interest of countries to accede to uranium or rare earths or other critical minerals that are necessary in very many technological areas, but in particular when it comes to uranium in nuclear. We see an exponential growth in interest. When you look at the uranium spot price, the markets, the prices are going up. Why? Because we see, like in India, you have 20 nuclear power plants, you are building 7 more, and more are on the line. And when you look at your neighbors in China, for example, they are building 26 new nuclear power plants on top of the 30-something they have. And when you look at Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, the United States, Latin America, you see a global movement, which indicates that this pressure on certain materials and natural resources is growing. One of the ways in which the IAEA help countries is to conduct these activities, including the mining cycle of uranium in a safe and environmentally friendly way, which is very important, of course.
Okay. But do you think it's ethical? Do you think it's ethical to arm twist any country into selling?
No, the arm twisting is a different thing. What I was referring in my
in
my answer is the normal extractive activities that happen in the world. Then on how deals are reached, this is a matter for analysis on discrete bilateral situations.
Okay. Shifting focus to another very important country you've been focusing on, and the world is looking at today, given the Israel-Hamas war. Iran is in focus with Trump administration back. How do you look at, you not so long ago visited Iran?
Yes.
What are the facilities looking like? Are they as alleged closer to nuclear weapons? What's the enrichment levels that they have reached? And are we looking at a future where talks could resume between Iran and the West?
We certainly hope so, and they must. They must. We want to be in a situation, in a position where Iran can, through the IAEA, because we are the inspectors, through the IAEA, confirm to the world that all the activities that they are conducting, that they are carrying out, are exclusively for peaceful purposes. What is the problem then, you would ask? The problem is that in the past, and even today, Iran has not been as forthcoming as they should be. Iran has on occasion not given the necessary answers to our inspectors. And why I say this? Because we happened to find traces of nuclear activity, in this case uranium, we were talking about just now, in places that were not supposed to be hosting any nuclear activity. So what we have been struggling in our conversation with our Iranian counterparts is to find out, if I found this here, where is this material? Where is the equipment that was being used to process this material? And so we have been in a sort of a circular dialogue against the backdrop of something that you also mentioned, which is the fact that Iran is enriching uranium at a very high level, 60% of a certain isotope of the uranium, which is very close to the level that you need for a nuclear device, for a weapon, for a bomb. Does that mean they have a nuclear weapon? No, but it is not irrelevant. It means that they are amassing high amounts, very, very important amounts of material at a level which is not normally used for civilian or peaceful purposes. So there is an element of ambiguity somewhere. And this is what we are trying to find out. And this is what we are trying to clarify. And this has different levels. Of course, there is the possibility of a dialogue between the United States and Iran. There is the former, you remember that there used to be an agreement called the JCPOA, where Iran had agreed on a number of things with the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, plus Germany that were there. And this agreement was sort of set aside. So that agreement today, people still talk about it, but in reality, it's not been followed.
But set aside by one country.
Initially, yes. And then Iran followed. So, and what we have now is this situation where there are no limits in what Iran is doing. So what we are trying is to help them clarify all these things so they can continue. You rightly framed this against the backdrop of a Middle East, which is in a very particularly volatile phase of its traditionally difficult reality that we have been witnessing for more than half a century, maybe. So this is a recipe for something very, very, very dangerous, if you want. So we are trying to avoid the situation where we get to a point where maybe unilateral action will be taken, maybe we'll be moving into a military conflict, we don't know. So this is why we are at the moment in an intensive process of consultation. Yesterday I was talking to the Vice Minister Foreign Affairs of Iran, who was returning from Beijing. You may have seen that there was a meeting, Russia, China. And so all the big players are talking. And of course, it is indispensable that we are the only ones there.
Yes.
Inspecting, looking, seeing what's going on, are part of that and try to help.
But how is the IAEA engaging Washington, D.C. then? Because at this point in time, there are 2 important statements that have come. One is that President Trump has shown interest in negotiating with Iran, but the Supreme Leader, Khamenei, did not like the language of the US President. Is that more important, or is there room for negotiation over here where you'll see Iran and US coming to the talking table? And what role can IAEA play in ensuring that they come before Iran goes nuclear?
In any configuration, the IAEA will have to be there.
Yes.
Be it 5, 4, 3, whichever,
mix.
Geometrical form you give to the table, we have to be there, because otherwise you just have a piece of paper. If you don't have the inspectors verifying what happens, then there is no value in what you negotiate. I think there is, of course, a dimension which is more political in who talks to whom. And here we have all these players that used to be together. They are no longer together. This is a new reality. In the past, you used to see Russia, China, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, all, if I may say so, relatively speaking, on the same side. And then Iran, and then there was a negotiation. Not anymore. So something very, very important has happened. Hence, this increasing importance of this bilateral, and of course the United States. Everybody is sort of, as in many areas of international life, is looking at what President Trump and the new administration is going to adopt as a policy. I think it's very important that in the message from President Trump, there is this idea of an agreement. Then, in diplomacy, in nuclear diplomacy, you can decline that in many ways, in many forms. But the fact that there is an outreach with the idea of an agreement, I think it is an interesting point of departure. Of course, there is a tit for tat. There are, words and sometimes even harsh words. But what we are looking from the perspective of the IAEA is how you decline this into a technically viable agreement that will prevent the appearance of a new nuclear weapon state in the international scene.
We're running out of time, but it's a rare opportunity to get you here. So just a few more questions on Iran. What is IAEA's assessment on how soon can, or reading on how soon can Iran actually go nuclear? Is there a reading? Is there a time frame? Are you racing against time?
Well, this is what many people speculate about, how close they are. And there's sometimes some confusion. So I thank you for the question, because it helps me explain that sometimes people make calculations on the basis of the amount of uranium that would be needed to have a nuclear device. You know what I mean? So if we take that metric, then they are very close. But there are many other things that must go into a device so it goes boom. It's not only having enriched uranium or plutonium. Then you have to have many other things. And we do not have. I have to be very clear. You know, I'm not an analyst. I'm an inspector of sorts. And we cannot say they're going to the. We don't have any credible indication that there is an organized, systematic
that they have the machine in place
or program to get to a nuclear weapon. That being said, it is not irrelevant that they are doing the many things they are doing, that there are certain things that they are not answered. So it is a mixed picture, and we have to try to put the jigsaw puzzle together to understand better.
Okay, the other nuclear threat comes from the European war, Russia-Ukraine. Polish president says and has asked US to place nuclear weapons in Poland. How much of a threat would that be if they actually do that?
Well, more nuclear weapons are certainly not conducive to stability or to peace. We have them. It's part of the reality of a world that has been operating in this way for many years, and nuclear deterrence, in a certain sense, has worked. I don't know if you need more or less, but let me say something on the reference to what has been said in Europe. The deployment of nuclear weapons in third countries is not new. Now, at this point, we do have nuclear weapons, American nuclear weapons, deployed in several countries in Europe. Maybe there is an idea to deploy more to the east, but per se, this would not be a novelty. This would not be something that we haven't seen. Russia has deployed nuclear weapons in Belarus, for example. So these are, of course, concerning developments, but it's not something that is completely new. We have seen this before. Obviously, this talks to the necessity to return to diplomacy,
right?
To return to presidential diplomacy, maybe, to a position where the big leaders sit around the table and that they try to reevaluate the nuclear order as is in the world in 2025.
Okay, one question on your past role and one to your future. As somebody who is part of the NSG, yes, played a critical role when India's conversations on NSG membership was taking place, what stopped or who stopped India's membership to the NSG?
I think there was a recognition when I was president of the NSG. I think we were as close as we had ever been.
Yes.
And I worked very hard with Foreign Minister Dr. Jay Shankar,
then Foreign Secretary,
who is then Foreign Secretary. He's a very good friend of mine. We were very, very close. I think the problem there was not India in itself, was the multilateral dynamic there, where the group in its diversity, there are horse tradings, there are equivalences being made. If this country comes in, the other country comes in, and
was there an India-Pakistan equation that China put into the mix?
I at that time I said I wouldn't have a problem. I think that countries that have important nuclear programs and that manifest a wish to participate in a group that fosters a responsible trade in nuclear exchange should be welcome. And let's have a conversation.
But is Pakistan one of them? Can Pakistan be?
Well, they at my time as president, they submitted an application immediately after India did, which is not surprising. It's part of the international dynamic. And of course, the big conversation was about India. India had already obtained a license, if you want, in 2008 to trade with most of the nations. Why? Because there was a recognition of the role, intrinsic role that India was and is playing above and beyond of the membership in the energy. The energy would have a lot to gain by having all countries that have important nuclear activities. This is what we all need. This is what we want, that everybody acts responsibly.
But in terms of consensus, was China a problem for India at the NSG?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think there were a number of dialogues and, that were affecting the possibility of a package.
Okay.
As a president at that time, I'm talking about, there have been many very distinguished successors that I had in the chair, so it might be a bit unfair because I haven't been following how they continued these negotiations. But everybody recognized at that time that we needed, as it happens sometimes in international relations, you needed some comprehensive formula to move forward. Political circumstances change in some countries and then they change positions, but that is that. What is important is the global role of India in nuclear is undisputable.
Okay. Looking to your future, we are looking at your name coming up as one of the top contenders for the future UN Secretary General's role. There are many women on the list too. How are you looking at that entire election that will be fought end of this year, if I'm not wrong, for the 2027 presidency or Secretary General?
Well, I think people have been talking about this or the possibility of my candidacy, looking at what we have discussed today. The role that the IAEA has been playing in a war where we have been able to talk to President Putin, to President Zelensky, without compromising any of our mission, playing a useful role. What we have been doing also in the Middle East, what we have done between China and Japan around Fukushima. So there is an idea that kind of approach, that kind of diplomacy that I have been trying to embody and to do at the IAEA could be replicated in a wider scale at the UN. So I'm considering that. So the process has not started yet. It will start towards the end of the year, as you say. So at that time, maybe we can talk again. But I'm seriously thinking about that.
But you've had as a career diplomat, a long and a very enriched experience in handling international agencies, countries, and bringing them together. Will that experience help you in your role as Secretary General should you be elected?
Of course.
On that note, wishing you the very best. Thank you so much for joining us here on the India Today Network. Thank you.